Anybody know? Raise your hand if you know, if you think you know what we're talking about this summer. Nobody knows. It's tough without the words, but if we say the words, then if we really give it away. Willow and Tristan, if you guys want to come up, you can. Do it one more time, let's see. Where? Where? Okay, does anyone know our theme now? Thank you. We are going to spend this summer spreading joy, not germs. Lord, I come, I confess, I
This morning's scripture comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 14 to 23 from the Contemporary English Version. And before I read this, I want to let you know it feels better speaking to a congregation than it does an empty room. After Jesus and his disciples had left the crowd and had gone into the house, they asked him what these sayings meant. He answered, "Don't you know what I'm talking about by now? You surely know that the food that you put into your mouth cannot make you unclean. It doesn't go into your heart, but into your stomach, and then out of your body." By saying this, Jesus meant that all foods were fit to eat. Then Jesus said, "What comes from your heart is what makes you unclean. Out of your heart come evil thoughts, vulgar deeds, stealing, murder, unfaithfulness in marriage, greed, meanness, deceit, indecency, envy, insults, pride, and foolishness. All of these things come from your heart, and they are what make you unfit to worship God." The Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would you bow with me in prayer? This morning, Lord, the circumstances feel strained. And yet, Lord, your Word is still powerful. I pray today, Lord, that you take this weak person that stands before you and purge them of themselves. I would pray today, Lord, that you would fill me with your Spirit, that you would take control of the words, and that you would use them to touch hearts. Speak to the Spirit. I pray this in your name. Amen. The art of the old adage is quickly and quietly slipping away from existence. An adage is much like a one-line parable. An adage is an old saying and contains commentary on certain moral truths and ethical statements. Morality and ethics seem to be disappearing from out of our culture, much like the adages are disappearing. We are in a season of graduation, a time when accomplishments, efforts, time, achievements, and perseverance are celebrated, the awarding of diplomas and degrees upon those who have met the qualifications that were needed to be confirmed. But this is no normal season, and no one has seen anything like it before. To the graduates of 2020, I can only convey a sadness that you could not experience what just about everybody before you got a chance to go through. There's really not been much normal about 2020. Graduation is a way of ushering you into the ranks of adulthood and maturity. And if it were all only that easy. I know people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who are sometimes more immature in their behavior than what I've sometimes seen out of preschool children. This is a time of newness when others will say, you can do more things now because you don't have some of the age limits. And yet in 2020, we're seeing a lot of new limits being set, like today. For our graduates, this may be the first year that you have the chance to vote. As you graduate, you will find that you will start to be inundated by telemarketers and phone calls and brochures of others trying to entice you to buy, invest, or commit to something you never knew that you needed and maybe really never will. It will be the allure of maybe getting your first credit card, or the potential to sink your money into things that you didn't know that you needed. I remember when I graduated, it was the era when you became eligible to have your birthday posted on a board at the Selective Service Office to see if you would qualify for a trip to Vietnam. Yes, you are being ushered into adulthood, but are you prepared for all that entails? For those who are going to be moving onward to some sort of secondary education, you're going to you're going to take classes on things that you never knew existed. You're You're going to run a gauntlet of courses that you need to know if you eventually want to have that piece of paper in your hand that verifies that you ran through those man-constructed obstacle courses and hoops that you needed to jump through. What you have learned throughout your life up until this point is going to be challenged. In the eyes of the world, you're now adults, but being adult makes you fair game because you should know better. And if you don't, you're about to be introduced to the world of hard lessons in life. Hard lessons come almost daily. The question is, will we learn from those hard lessons? Not the kind that come from a textbook or in a class. The kind that come from experiencing life and making your own decisions and your own mistakes. Now, I mentioned about an old adage at the beginning of this message. And the old adage for this morning is, you can't keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. The presence of birds is a fact of life. They usually keep a safe distance from humans chirping at us from trees or yards. They also fly over our heads going from point A to point B in their travels. Birds are not the cleanest of creatures, and if you happen to own a car, you see mine parked out back, I think it's evident of the reminders that they leave. You cannot prevent birds from flying over your head or your car, and you cannot prevent results that happen. But the adage cautions us, however, that we can become so comfortable and complacent with birds that we might allow them to start to become too familiar with us. It's one thing to deal with the occasional reality of the mess of birds that fly over us. It's another thing entirely to invite them into a close relationship where the mess becomes the norm. Not everything that crosses your path in life is going to have your best interest at heart. Not everyone you meet is looking out for your own good. Not everything that you are taught is going to make you a better person. The challenge to you is to learn that you will encounter things in life that you will need to learn to rise above. And if you don't learn to rise, you will learn to settle for living among things that can diminish your potential. I hear a lot of people asking, with all this going on, you think we're in the last days? Well, all I can say for sure is that each day that passes is bringing us one day closer to whenever that is. In Matthew 24, Jesus said in the last days it would be like the days of Noah, when God repented of having made mankind. In the days of Noah, people had reached the point where God was so grieved in his heart that he was compelled to act. In Genesis 6, we find that society had become a mess, a literal bird's nest. And God makes the observation that there is great wickedness among the inhabitants of the earth. It is recorded that every imagination and every thought of the heart is consumed with the presence of evil. I want us to realize that back then that was something that society had chosen to go along with. And it says that they dwelt in this evil state continually. Now, when a statement is made that the thought of the heart means that the evil was the desire and the intent, and then coupled with imagination, we discover that they were only limited by the scope of what they could mentally conceive and act upon. Once again, we find that man's actions are limited only by what things he can imagine in his mind, just like in the days of Noah. Which raises the question that if on the scale that tips God's mercy and grace into an act of judgment, where are we today? You know, sometimes we've done a marvelous job of blaming other things on our condition. But a lot of times we've not owned up to the responsibility that we have. That sometimes we have not done what is right. I see a correction going on right now in our society, a correction that is long overdue. In the passage today, Jesus was having a conversation, first with the people, and then with his disciples about the blame for evil. Jewish people had a lot of dietary restrictions, especially regarding unclean animals. And you almost get a sense of some persons were blaming evil on the meals that they were eating. Maybe they had a pulled pork sandwich or a shrimp basket, which were all things that were prohibited in the Levitical teachings. But Jesus took them to task, saying that the permeation of evil had nothing to do with things that pass through one's digestive tract. Jesus said evil was the manifestation of something that was already intrinsic in the person. Evil had nothing to do with birds flying over their heads or cars or statues. Evil had everything to do with allowing those birds to build nests in their hair. I want us to notice that when Jesus starts listing those things that come out of a person's heart, he starts his list with evil thoughts, the very thing that consumed the generation of Noah's time. To our graduates, both high school and college, the world is going to indoctrinate you to try and get you to think like the rest of the world. The world wants to make a nest in your hair. As one who has had his share of hoops to jump through, I want to tell you, jump whatever hoops you must reach to get to your destination, but don't let the hoops trip you up. Sometimes the hoops will take the forms of things noble or good, or maybe even religious. Be cautious, because they are often anything but worthy. Deal with the birds flying overhead and the temporary inconvenience and mess that they might make in your life. But do not give them the opportunity to nest in your hair, because if you do, you may never get free of them. And I think what's interesting here is that Jesus makes this statement: all of these things come from your heart, and they are what make you unfit to worship God. Do you realize that you can become unfit to worship God? To me, that's a really gut punch. But we see it happen. Adam and Eve got it in their head that they wanted to be like God, and they ate of the fruit of the garden. And that made them unfit for God to be able to walk in their presence. We read that Cain's offering to God was rejected because in God's eyes, what Cain brought and offered to him, it was not worthy of worship. There's a lot going on in our world. And as Jesus pointed out, it's not what you take in your mouth calorie-wise or carbohydrate-wise. I have to watch my carbohydrates. I have to watch my calories. Yes, those things can harm you, but not in the context of what Jesus is talking here. What Jesus is talking about is that when we let our own thoughts run wild, and we start to convince ourselves that we know more than God, that we can get into trouble. I know one of the things that got promoted during our downtime was the concept of ingesting bleach. I want to talk about that for just a minute, because that was something that was never intended that people would have on a diet. I want to tell you that when I was about 8 years old, I went to my cousin's in the summer, and we were outside playing. My aunt and uncle had just built a new house, And I went in and I asked for a drink of water. And they didn't have their well hooked up yet, so they were carrying water from the old house up to the new one. And they carried the water up in Clorox bottles. And it just so happens the day that I visited, they were doing the laundry, and somebody had grabbed the actual Clorox bottle and put it in the refrigerator. And so, remember those little sippy cups with the gold flecks in them? I was handed a glass of very cold Clorox, and I drank it all down. Now you would have thought, well, surely you recognize the smell of Clorox, and you would have set it down, but when you're not that old, and I was raised on a farm, and every year they used to clean the barn out, and that the scent, the smell would permeate into the ground, and our spring, where I lived, started to smell like the inside of the barn. And my dad would go back with a half cup of Clorox and dump it in the spring, and we tasted water that tasted like Clorox. And so I was not unfamiliar with the smell. And so I drank it down. I do have to tell you that cold Clorox goes down very easily. When it comes back up, it's not so pleasant. Back in the day that I grew up, we didn't go to hospitals for things like that. You only went to the hospital if you would cut a limb off. And so I was given a piece of bread with butter on it, and that was the cure. We've got a lot of stuff going on in our society today that needs a cure. And I don't think a piece of bread with butter on it is going to cut it today. The only thing that's going to cut what's going on today is Jesus. Only Jesus. I think the church is coming into a time when it has the potential to start to reach people that has not reached before. We've got to get some of the stuff that was listed on that list of Jesus out of our own being and get ourselves fit for worship, so that in doing so, we might be able to start to lead other people into worship. Because we are in a different time, I think maybe it's time that we as a church get down to business and start to live into what Jesus has said. It's not about a lot of legalism. It's about loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our mind, and all of our soul. And then learning to love our neighbor as ourselves. Right now, sometimes I don't see the love for the neighbor. We're wearing masks because we love our neighbor. We're social distancing because we love our neighbor. We're starting to walk in the streets because we're starting to learn we need to love our neighbor. Our world is changing. We don't like change, but I think that if we take a lead on this, we can be led into change that is better for the world, for us, and for our neighbor. Would you bow with me in prayer? Gracious God, I come to you this day and ask that you would speak to us. There's a whole list of stuff that we are told we are not to have within us. Things that make us unfit for worship. I pray today, God, that you would start to equip us to be better worshipers, to be better followers, ask this morning, Lord, if you're speaking to hearts, that you would begin to prepare them for a deeper relationship with you. Be with us, Lord, in this day. Be with us in our changing world. And Lord, that through the process of change, let us be changed for the better. Let us be changed more into your image. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be